The Power Factor Show with Steve and Rick. Episode 23, Handloading, Part 1.
Gun Rights Radio Network has the best pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun rights podcast available on the net. The podcasts are absolutely free when subscribing using iTunes or Zune Marketplace. Or if you want, you can just listen from the website. Make sure you visit gunrightsradio.com to subscribe. Podcasting freedom, one episode at a time.
Welcome back to Power Factor. I'm Rick. Steve's not here. He's taking a little break. He'll be here later. We're going to do a series of episodes on hand loading, and that is reloading the cases that you've expended in all the shooting that you're doing in practicing for the competition you're going to be doing or are doing. Hand loading is a way to save a ton of money on ammo or to increase the amount of shooting that you do at the same cost. And we're going to go into the economies of reloading, how much it costs to hand load versus buying factory ammo. And we're going to just break it down, show you how it works from picking up the spent brass off the ground to ending up with finished hand-loaded ammo. So watch our next 3 episodes and get the scoop. So as everybody is aware now, ammo prices went up considerably over the last 3 or 4 years or so. And when I started reloading, it was 15 years ago now, ammo prices were, you know, they're cheaper than they are now, and component prices and hand-loading ammo was cheaper. But as prices went up, essentially post 2007, even as the component prices went up, the value of hand loading increased. Say in 2005, 2006, you might buy a box of 45 ACP ammo for $15. My hand loaded ammo was costing me about $4 for 50 rounds. In the post-Obama era, when a box of 50 45 rounds cost $25, you can hand load a box of 50 rounds for about $5. So even as prices have gone up on hand loading components, the value of hand loading has gone up even greater because it's nothing compared to the way factory loaded ammo has gone up. If you look at trying to pay off your investment in hand loading, you've got equipment, a press, dies for each caliber, powder measure, powder scale, various tools that are necessary, and then you've got all your component costs, depending on whether you are buying new components. For instance, the most expensive component is brass. A lot of places, if you shoot on an outdoor range or even some indoor ranges, you can arrange to pick up brass. It essentially has no cost. If you're going to start reloading, you anticipate doing so, and you're buying factory ammo, save your brass. Essentially, then it's free brass. Even if you have to buy new brass from a source like Starline, the price is still justified because you can load the cases 20, 30 times, and so that most expensive part, the most expensive component, is reused many times, and so you'll pay it off eventually as long as you continue to pick the brass up. You'll have to buy bullets, primers, powder, and that stuff, by shopping, getting the best deals, buying in quantity, you can save a lot of money. For instance, a pound of powder might cost you $20. 4 pounds of powder, $80. And so it's, you just shop around, buy in quantity, it increases your savings. But we'll get into how to do the best values, how to shop for the components you want, how to maximize your dollar value for your expending dollar, and that's what we're here for. Okay, so you've decided you want to hand load your ammo. You got to start shopping for components. You can there's places now where you can buy used brass, which can often be a pretty good value, or you can buy new brass from a number of sources. I'd say probably the most popular source among competition shooters is Starline.
Yeah.
And they advertise in most of the major magazines. You can get them. You can order directly from them. What's the price on Starline brass?
I think Starline brass, typically for 45 ACP, you're looking somewhere around 17, 18 cents or per case, and I think typically 9mm is somewhere around 10 to 13 cents per case, give or take.
And the
like
cases,
you said, or if you go to the range, it's free. I mean,
yeah, exactly. If you can arrange to find some place to pick it up, it's great.
Or what a lot of people actually do, and I've done this before in the very beginning, and this literally is the very beginning, but you go out and you buy a box of 45 ACP or whatever, and you shoot it up and save your brass, and it just, seemingly, I think it's funny because you put them away at night and they multiply. I don't know how it happens, but,
Yeah. So after you've got your brass supply secured, you're going to need bullets.
In my opinion, there's 3 different choices you can go with bullets. And I started out using your good old-fashioned lead lube bullet. That's the bottom end of the scale. The upper end of the scale is your jacketed or full metal jacket or total metal jacket bullet. A step down from that is your plated bullet. And the middle of the range, which Rick and I both use, is a molly-coated bullet. So I've been using molly-coated bullets now for probably the last, I would say, at least 10 years plus, maybe more than that.
Yeah, I've been using them almost since I started in competition, certainly. I mean, when I was experimenting with reloading, I was using jacketed bullets and plain lead, but I did not like the cost of jacketed and did not like the mess of plain lead.
Yeah.
And plain lead bullets can be found really cheaply. I mean, almost the variation in price among cast lead bullets makes me wonder just the variation in quality.
Right.
I mean, I'll see some that are twice as expensive as others, and you figure the component there is lead and lube. So why does one cost twice as much? And I suspect it's got something to do with the purity of the components.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about making bullets, but I know whatever components they put into the lead, it's not just lead, it's antimony and other hardeners and things like that. So
yeah, but if you buy plain lead bullets are about, I think, half the price of jacketed bullets, give or take.
Yeah.
And then the polymer coated bullets and the plated bullets are kind of slotted in between. I just think the value of the black bullets is the best.
And Rick and I have both been using Bear Creek bullets for quite some time now. I mean, initially we both started out with Master Blaster bullets years ago. We were lucky that the owner of it was very close to us, but he had since sold that off to Black Bullet International. Yeah. But we've been using Bear Creek now, which is kind of our own hidden secret. So don't tell anybody.
But when I do use jacketed bullets, and I still do, when I'm loading 45, I use the black bullets almost exclusively. If I'm loading 38 Super, sometimes 9mm, 10mm, higher velocity loads, I'll use Montana Gold. That's kind of my preference.
And for my Glock, I use Precision Delta. And again, because of the fact you're not supposed to shoot a lead bullet in it, and even I consider the molly-coated bullet a lead bullet from that standpoint. I shoot a jacketed bullet there, so.
Yeah, so we've got our cases, our bullets. You've got to put something in the case. So powder, gunpowder. A lot of thought can go into the types of powder you use, why you select the powders you do, the quantity we covered already. I generally buy 4 pounds at a time. That's 8 pounds?
8, yeah.
Better value in the high quantity. So if you have a favorite load, once you find a favorite load, you might want to go like a pound at a time while you're searching
until you find what you're looking for
your favorite load, and then stock up on the larger quantities. But generally, for competition shooting, you're looking for an economical way to reach the power factor that you want. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
I look at powder. I have 3 criteria for powder, and it's kind of funny, but it is what it is. First off, it's got to be cheap. Okay. Second off is that it shouldn't take very much of it to get the load that you need.
Which contributes to the cheapness.
Yeah, but I'm saying cheap to begin with.
Right,
I mean, there's some powders per pound that are $25, and there's others that are $15. So I first off use that initial gauge.
Yeah.
And then my next gauge is it can't take a whole lot. So what's the point of buying, a $15 powder where it takes a whole mess of grains to make major? And then the next criteria, and me, clean. I love clean burning powder, and clays. Actually, I started using clays when I was loading shotgun. Started out using this for 12-gauge shotgun loads, and then discovered that it works excellent for 45 ACP. And it has all the criteria that I'm looking for. It's cheap, it doesn't take very much to make major, and it burns extremely clean. Yeah. The other thing is that 45 ACP is extremely soft in recoil. I don't think there's anything softer in recoil than Clay's powder. It is literally, you ask anybody who's trying to load 45 ACP, and they'll tell you that they're either using a 200-grain bullet in Clays or a 230-grain bullet in Clays, but Clays is always the powder everybody goes to. It's
not an especially versatile powder. There's not a whole lot, in my experience, that you can do with it. If you're loading major power 45, it's awesome. But beyond that, I don't think it's.
Well, you can load 9. I've loaded 9
you can. Yeah, you can.
Right. And
but
it loads 12 gauge.
You experimented loading 40 and didn't like it.
Yeah, well, I liked it, but it's right in the very edge of being for major power factor. And people actually load clays in 40 for minor. If you're trying to load, like people who have 40 caliber guns and trying to shoot production, they'll load down to minor, and it works very well there. But for major power factor, you don't want to use it. What I use there is Hodgson tight group, and this is very economical and clean burning powder, and doesn't take a whole lot of it to get the job done. Which again, all my criteria was perfect. So.
Yeah, and I use tight group for 38 Super, and I've used it for 9mm. And some people use it for 45, but I don't like it at all for 45.
Yeah.
So just again, you want to search around, find the powders that satisfy your needs. For a couple of years, I was loading Vidibori N320, which was a great powder.
Great powder.
Didn't need a lot of it.
There.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where you get into the price of it per pound was so high that when I switched to clays, which I got away with a smaller quantity of clays for a given velocity, so the less per pound, smaller quantity per load, my per load cost was cut in half by switching from a powder that I needed 5.5 grains at $24 a pound to 4.2 grains at $15 a pound.
Yep.
And so you need to kind of do a little searching around. There are powders that are tried and true, Bullseye, Unique, 231.
Right.
But if you look harder, you can find stuff that performs as well or better in the specific application, less expensive. There's tons of data around. I mean, it's not like it's a secret. You can go online. All the powder makers, bullet makers publish load data.
Get yourself a loading book. I mean, the hand loading books that are out there that Nosler, Hornady. I mean, all the big name powder companies reloading companies will produce typically ABCs of reloading. It's really great reference material for learning how to get into reloading. But in terms of just load data, there's free load data from all the different powder manufacturers out there. So
yeah, and it's almost all available online. I like to keep a print copy of a lot of them sitting on my bench, so I can just whip it open if I need something in it, just in a moment's notice. But the computer's right on the other side of the wall there.
I keep it in my iPhone.
See, I can call Steve on my phone and have him look it up on his phone.
Yeah. Primers.
Primers are an interesting tale. For years and years and years, they were about $10 a thousand,
give or take.
And then there was the first big primer scare, which was probably 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
And the price jumped up to about $15 a thousand, and then it stuck there for years and years and years. And then there was the Obama scare, and prices went up again, availability went down.
$50 a thousand.
Yeah, if you could get them. And some
yeah.
people are very specific about what kind of primers they want. If you're shooting a revolver, everybody wants Federal. But Federals were one of the ones I could never find when I was looking for them.
Yeah.
And so I changed to my favorite primer, the Wolf. Good Russian-made.
Friends don't let friends shoot Wolf primers.
So
it's been nice knowing you, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
So anyway, so you find your choices in powders, primers, brass, bullets. There's all kinds of places you can go to find sources for the stuff. And then beyond the actual components of the cartridge itself, then the associated equipment that you need to turn those components into a loaded cartridge.
Are you ready for Steve's power tip?
Okay, so for this week's Power Factor Power Tip, I'm going to talk about unloaded gun on table starts. Actually, we're just going to talk about gun on table starts. You're going to run into either two different types, the unloaded gun or loaded gun. In terms of getting the gun off the table, there's really two different techniques for doing that. One is that you come in with a weak hand and kind of grab it from the sight and flick it up into your hand like this and then come up and shoot. The other one is simply to come in with your strong hand and jam your thumb underneath the gun and scoop it up and bring it up and shoot. Now, you can probably use either method for a loaded gun on the table start. I actually prefer to develop one method and use it everywhere. I like to use basically just a simple method of scooping the gun up rather than trying to flick it into your hand and do this. And the reason being is that the other half of gun on table starts is the unloaded gun on table start. which is where you start either with all your mags on the table or your mags are on the belt. But the point being is that your gun is empty, and you have to. First step is load the gun. Now, typically, what you're going to see in this is that you have an empty magazine. Loaded magazines on the table. What I like to do is position the magazines around the gun. Now, depending on whether you're going to be shooting from a single position, or if you're shooting from a single position as I'm standing here, I draw and I do all my shooting here, or if I have to go somewhere else. If I have to go somewhere else and I have to get these magazines up off the table and put them in the pouches, that's going to be my first move. So what I'll do is grab something like that and go and then load the gun. One point is that you cannot take mags in any division and stuff them like in your waistband or your pockets or anything like that and then use them later. Requirement is in IPSC is that all your magazines have to be carried in retention devices, so they have to be in mag pouches. You can put them in pockets if it's legal to do so in the division that you're in, front or rear, but you can't stuff them in your waistband or stuff them somewhere else. So for those situations where you're talking about unloaded gun on table, the first move is basically load the gun. The reason I don't like the flick technique is that in terms of an unloaded gun on table, the first thing I have to do is basically get that magazine. So rather than flicking the gun, then going to the magazine, to minimize time, I'm going to basically go for both at the same time. So I'm using snap caps here. The first move is going to look like, also the requirement, hammer has to be down. So the first move is rack it and go. Okay, pretty simple as that, but that's all you're looking at for that move. Now, a lot of times the course description is going to say gun laying flat on table, or magazines also laying flat on table. If they don't say that, some people will try to do propping stuff like this, or trying to prop the gun on their magazines so that they think they're going to get to the gun faster. Yeah, it may do that, but the problem is that it's also a very unstable position here, and you can see, if you miss the gun or whatever, knock it over, you've just wasted all the time that you tried to be gamey by doing something like that. So again, I prefer the KISS method. I just developed something that's very simple and very consistent, that you can just pick the gun up, rack it, and go. Another variation on that, if they don't say that the magazines have to be laying flat on the table, I don't recommend doing this, but you can see where this is going. The move is that and go, and then the super high-tech method is this. Take your magazine, position it at the base of the gun, and the move is this. That. Very quick. Doesn't work in all guns.
After you've got all your components arranged and you want to get into the all of the stuff associated with loading, you've got kind of, I don't know if we want to go top down or left to right, but you've got the press itself. Here's a single stage press. You've got your die set, your shell holder. Over here we've got a powder measure or powder scale, and that's to set your powder measure, which is covered here to prevent ultraviolet light from degrading my powder. Let's see, what else is there? If you want to get deeper into it than that, you've got a powder or a case tumbler, which if you were a kid and had a rock polisher, it's just like that. It tumbles the cases and
I used a rock tumbler for years until my motor finally went out.
Yeah, and you can just wash brass. I mean, when I was first starting out, I didn't care if it was shiny.
I remember used to say they'd stick it in the trunk of their car and drive around for a week.
I literally put it in my washing machine. I had the washing machine that agitates this way.
Back when you were single.
Yep, tied it into a pillowcase and just threw it in there. So multiple ways to get your brass clean, but then you have to decide how much you want to spend, how much convenience is important. How much you're willing to spend for convenience. Single stage press is inexpensive, easy to set up, doesn't take up much room, but it's very time intensive to load. If you're shooting pistol competition, let's say, for instance, you wanted to shoot every week 100 rounds of practice and 150 rounds at a match,
right.
250 rounds a week. When I used to load on a single stage press, which I did for a number of years, it took me about an hour and a half to load 100 rounds. So my weekly time investment would be 2 or 3 hours for a week's worth of ammo. And I did that successfully for a number of years. I guess I just didn't know any better. And then, of course, the alternative is the progressive press, which just about everybody ends up getting.
It's funny from that standpoint of discussion of time management and everything. I started out using a lead turret press, which is kind of they called it a progressive, but it didn't operate that well as a progressive.
Yeah, I started on a lead turret press.
Did you?
As well.
Did
you
really? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the way I operated that is I kind of treated it as a rotating single stage press. I would knock out 50 primers, and I'd set those aside, and then I'd reprime the 50 using the hand primer thing.
Yeah,
and then
for each case, you would rotate.
Right.
Four times.
So, yeah.
I don't know who decided anybody was going to do that.
So, like what you were saying, I think in order to reload 300 rounds, it took me about an hour or whatever. And at the time I was in school, and as I started doing more and more shooting, I needed more and more ammo, but I didn't have time to do it because I was either doing homework. And it finally got down to, I literally, when I was in college, I had, about hours a week, and anything that you could find that was spare time was, like, oh boy. So I literally looked at it from that standpoint, saying if I only have an hour to reload, I want to get as much ammo as I can get. So that's where I went and took the step up, like I think you did.
Yeah,
and
after loading on this for a number of years, I bought a Dillon Progressive, and
shall we?
Ta-da! Oh, that was supposed to be very dramatic. Oh, jeez, Steve. That's my low primer warning. The feature of the Dillon. Dillon, I think, amongst competition shooters, is far and away the most popular progressive press. This is actually Dillon's economy press, the square deal. It's really nice for reloading pistol ammo, but it's got some limitations. It doesn't take up a lot of space on the bench. All the popular calibers are loadable on the press, but if you have anything that's kind of unusual, like the reason this press, all my stuff, as you'll notice, is screwed onto the bench with C-clamps, and that's so I can move stuff around. This press isn't usually set up here. I've got it set up now because I'm loading some 30 Luger, which is a bottleneck case, which does not lend itself to loading on a progressive because you have to lube it before you can size it, and it kind of defeats part of the value of loading on the progressive. But we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the progressive versus the single stage here in a minute.
So one of the things with the square deal B is you can only reload pistol brass or pistol ammunition on that. And I took the step up when I went and got the 550B, which allows you to reload not only pistol but also rifle, and I reload 223 at the same time as well. So I load 223, 45 long Colt, 45 ACP, 9mm, 40, and I think that's everything that I reload. So I'm reloading quite a few different calibers. But one thing I helps kind of facilitate quick caliber swaps is I have multiple tool heads, so my powder assembly bar just literally slides on the top of the assembly, so my dies are all preset.
Each caliber.
I can make very quick switches. So this one, I think I have my, this is my 40 cal set that I have here. The other thing that I got is this micrometer powder bar from Unique Tech, and it provides a very fine adjustment of the powder measure. Is very reproducible, so when you dial up something or whatever, you can make a note of the settings that you have and immediately come back to it from time to time. So you literally know, when I'm loading 9mm, I set it to this. When I'm loading 40 caliber, I set it to that. And it really speeds up trying to get things back up and running very quick. I think this is they're somewhat expensive, but I think it's kind of like, buy it once, cry once, and enjoy the benefits after that. I really think anybody who's a serious reloader should consider getting something like that because it really works out well.
Yeah. I don't change my loads very often. For instance, I've been loading Clay's powder and 200 grain bullets on this press for over 5 years, and I essentially leave it set up for that. I've got a second square deal over here that I'll, depending on what I might want to shoot at a given time, let's say I want to shoot an IDPA match, an enhanced service pistol, so I want to load it from 38 Super, I'll bring that press around and put it here. And usually the breakdown is if it's a small primer cartridge, I'll leave that set for small primer. And if it's a large primer cartridge, sometimes I'll switch this press over because that's just one less thing to change. The caliber conversions, they can be fairly simple, like on Steve's with the exchangeable tool heads.
Right.
Separate tool head and powder measure for each caliber. You can just plug them in, take them out. This is a little more involved. You can buy separate tool heads, so this whole part, unbolts. And I know people that have have different calibers lined up on the bar. They just slap the one on that they want. Then you've got to change the shell plate and some other stuff inside, but it's a pretty quick changeover. So if you're loading multiple calibers, you might consider getting a press that's easy to change, or like me, I just bought multiple presses. These are pretty cheap. I got these used for $175 each. I think new they're about $375 each.
More about that.
What is the 550, 650?
550 about $450 right now, and $650 I don't know, probably another at least $100, maybe $170 more than that.
Yeah, so it seems pretty daunting. I mean, the initial outlay can seem pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But again, if you're shooting, 1,000 rounds a month, it'll pay off pretty quick.
And there's a lot of different presses that are out there, and I'm not going to badmouth any of them, but I've had really good luck with Dillon equipment. And the one thing I really like about Dillon stuff is that they have their lifetime no BS warranty. And I don't know if you've ever had to use anything of that, but
yeah,
a small part breaks, the ball falls out of here or whatever. You're making a chamber or a caliber change, and the ball goes flying across the floor and rolls out, your front of your house, and who knows where it went.
Yeah.
I keep a few spare parts. I decided to buy the spare parts kit, but still, if anything breaks or whatever, you call them up, and 3 days later, you've got a replacement for it.
Yeah. I bought both my presses used, and it's not like they ask for my purchaser number or my receipt or anything. I just said, hey, I broke one of these. Like these, there's brass bushings on both sides of the arm here, and on the older versions of the press, those were plastic. There's a lot of white plastic bearings in the press that can be easily replaced, and I've rebuilt this one a couple of times using the parts kit that includes all the plastic bushings. But when this arm, these little side connector arms that connect the big lever to that's the technical name for it. This is the big lever, and these are the side arms. I think these are actually they do have some specific name, but I broke about 4 of these. And on my 2 presses, and they finally said, here, take a complete set of these new brass bushings, replace all the plastic ones. And there's just a little spring and a pin in there, and the stuff is easy to replace. Like I said, with their spare parts kit, I've completely disassembled and rebuilt this thing a couple of times, preferring to have it here and do it myself. If I sent this back to them, they'll not only completely clean it and rebuild it, but if there's any parts on it that have become obsolete, they'll replace all those parts.
Yeah.
So, I know this is the older version of the powder measure because it's got
this
these spring returns on it. Steve's has like a mechanical return on it.
Yeah, mine has. They have an actuator arm that sits on here now. It hooks up to another part here lower in the 550 that operates the powder bar here.
So if I sent my press back for servicing, they probably would send it back with a brand new powder measure on it. And that's just the way they are. And so I think that's why they've become number one.
There's been stories of people having house fires or running over their press with a truck. How you do that, I don't know. But at any rate, and replacing those.
So get the blue stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
And beyond then the press, depending on how far you want to go, you can. This powder measure still needs a means of determining the weight of your charge. So you need either like lead as the cheap dipper method for, they've got a chart. You buy a bunch of these little miniature spoons, and that will, if you're using this powder in this spoon, your charge weight is that. A little more advanced than that is the powder measure that can be adjusted to suit a charge weight set on a powder scale. So the scale is just usually a balance beam scale.
Pull your scale down.
Oh, okay. Here's my scale. This is about 20 years old. This is a Reading. I think it's called like a number 2 or something. But it just reads in grains. You set the balance beam, put your powder charge in here, and it'll tell you your weight, and then you're adjusting your powder measure to suit the charge weight that you got from your load data, that you got from the internet, that you got from Steve's phone. And after you get your load data, you've got it. There's a definite process that you want to go through to build your load. You don't just open the book. It's not like cooking a chicken where it says put it in the oven for an hour. You've got to kind of build up your load because it's dangerous. I mean, you can blow up your press, you can blow up your head, And so using the load data, published load data, powder scale, powder measure, bullet weight, all that combined information, you get a good starting load, and then that sends you on the way to your final load that you're going to want to balance your bullet weight velocity.
The next higher tech version of the beam scale is the electronic scales that are out there, and I know you can get. Dillon makes one, everybody makes one. Harbor Freight even makes one. I don't know how good they are, but at any rate,
Steve has one in his phone.
Actually,
you just pour the powder.
Yeah, but there is an app for that. There probably is an app for
that.
Let's go look at that.
So that covers the basics behind hand loading, equipment, components. And now in part 2, we're going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts, hands-on, show you the actual reloading process.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, you can send us an email at powerfactorshow@gmail.com, or you can hit the website and contact us there at powerfactorshow.com.
Yeah.
So until then,
sayonara.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Rick.
And that's the way it is.